Alright, so this is a video about my garage heating system, shed heating system, whatever you want to call it. It's not particularly cold in New Zealand, but it gets cold in Taupo. As you can see, the little temperature gauge, wherever it is, you see there, it's 12 degrees in the garage today. I mean, it's not that cold, but I made this heating system. This is my third version of a heating system for my garage. This is a heat pump, but not just any heat pump. This is a marine heat pump. So it takes water coming in here. This is just a bypass which goes to the washing machine, but this is just off the washing machine hose. That's cold water going into this valve. This is a thermostatically controlled mixing valve, and this is hot water which is coming through a heating coil. So you can see that's a radiator, if you want to call it, but that's a proper heating coil out of a fan coil unit, an air conditioning system. Then it's got a fan here. This is a high velocity fan. I've got a little thermocouple there, a little temperature gauge there. This is the outlet from the heat pump, and on the back of this unit here, you might be able to see with the camera up in there, I don't know if you can see it, I can't see it, but yeah, there's a heating radiator there. So what happens is, the way it works, and this can also be used for cooling, this just is a heat pump, so it's taking heat out of the water, even though it's cold water, and at this time of year the water's probably 12 degrees C, so I don't know how I can demonstrate it, but the water coming out of the tap, maybe 15 degrees C, something like that, and then goes through the heat pump, and the heat pump takes 2 or 3 degrees out of that water before it goes down the drain. So it's a total loss heating system. We don't get charged for water in New Zealand, so that's a good thing. I know some places they have to pay for water, but in New Zealand you can have as much water as the tap will give you and nobody cares. There's tons of water in this country. I'll show you it working. Now, the way I've got it set up, I can use the hot water tap, which is connected to a propane boiler outside. And this is just my normal domestic hot water system. So when I turn on a tap, it starts that boiler. And so I'll turn on the tap. I'll set this for 30 degrees C. I'll turn on the tap under here. That's punching what will be, once it starts and the hot water gets through from the boiler. So that's taking heat from the boiler, but you don't want too hot of water going through the system. Plug in a couple of plugs. It's kind of loud at this point because this is the warm-up phase, and so that's kicked in the fan coil unit. Watch the temperature gauge. So there's a little bit of heat coming through here now. So that's normal hot water. That's probably going to let me keep my hand on there for a minute or two, then I won't be able to do it. It's coming up. That's the temperature of the air coming out. So it's coming out at 14, and this is the temperature coming out of the heat pump. The heat pump takes a lot longer to warm up. It takes maybe 15 minutes to really get going. I've got another aspect to this, is I can add the cold water now. So now I've got cold water mixing with hot water, and through this mixing valve, it will regulate the amount of hot water going into the system to deliver 30 degrees C to the heat pump. I've noticed that, like in a marine application, you would have maybe the hottest water you'd sail in might be 38 degrees C if you're in the tropics. And the coldest water you might find yourself sailing in you know, just above 0. But the water won't freeze because the latent heat of fusion would require too much energy to overcome the latent heat of fusion. So it's only going to take 2 or 3 degrees out of the water, and even if it was at 0 degrees, it still wouldn't freeze the water, but it will still take energy out of it. So I've got this soundproof cover up, and I've got a little secondary coil here. And this is cooling my fan motor because I've found that this fan motor gets very hot. That's my own idea. It's just a little copper tube coming out of this water supply here, wrapped around a few times, and then it's a separate outlet which just shows me as a telltale. And so I'm getting a little bit of heat now. So there's the temperature of this unit. It's blowing 23 degrees into this room, which is at 12 degrees. But that's actually quite a powerful fan, so that's pushing air, you know, right over here. It's distributing them around my garage. You know, it's a bloody big garage. You know, it's a real bloke's garage, and you know, it's got a 3-meter stud. It's bigger than a double garage, and it's got a lot of stuff in it. And I need it, you know, in the winter. I need to be able to use my garage, obviously, for doing things. But so. We've got 25 degrees now, and the heat pump itself is up to 22 degrees. And out the back, if we go outside, coming outside, it's just dusk here. Those are my dogs. That's my doggy. You see the little boiler? See? Quite efficient, because this is at very low load, but there's just enough heat there that I can put my hand on that and hold it there, and so it's not losing a lot of efficiency in terms of heat. So it's taking a bit of heat out of the hot water. Or, you know, there's not a great deal of hot water going through it, but it's enough to keep that little 15 kilowatt boiler going. And if I turn it down below 30, it isn't enough, and it stops. So I leave it at 30 degrees C, because this phase, all I'm trying to do is get the thing warmed up. And so it's up to 27 degrees now, 27 degrees, and the room temperature is still 12 degrees. This one here is up to 26 degrees, room temperature is 12 degrees. So just give that a few more minutes. But I can put my hand on there. You know, that's a lower velocity fan there. But there's a decent amount of heat. I mean, this thing here is rated at 15 kilowatts of heat. So 15 kilowatts of heat, if you think about that, that would require, if it was a direct, you know, normal type resistance heater, 3 kilowatts equals 10 amps, so 15 amps, and this thing draws about 7 or 8 amps, so it's a lot more efficient than having any sort of other heater. I mean, I could spend $6,000 or $7,000 and put a normal heat pump in here, but this was like bits and pieces I've found second hand. And as you can see down here, I've got 2 more of these marine heat pumps available to use, and I was actually thinking about putting 2 of these in series, because I can easily use the same water twice to give it even more efficiency. But one's sufficient even on a cold morning or a cold night. One's sufficient to heat this room up. So our heating coil, you notice I keep these separate because I did originally have it with this door, and this flap would come down, and I could take the hot air out of the heat pump and put it through the coil. But then I realized, well, it's less efficient that way, because I want to take the cold air from the room. The cold air from the room comes up through here, and the cold air from the room's going up the back of there, and then it's blowing out the heat pump separately to the fan coil. Now that's blowing a lot of hot air at 29 degrees C. The heat pump now is starting to warm up. It's 31. Room temperature is now up to 13. Fan coil's 29, it's 13. So the room's up to 13 degrees, so we picked up 1 degree in the length of time I've been doing the video. And I get it up to 16, 17 degrees C, which is perfectly fine for working on cars, motorbikes, that sort of thing. There's absolutely no need to have it hotter than that, because you're moving around, you're getting up, you're on the floor, you're lifting things, you're moving your body around. You don't want it too hot. I mean, you just don't want it freezing cold so you get a chill or something. So the fan coil's up to 29 degrees C. It comes up to 32 degrees C. That's about where that one's going to stay. 29 is about what it will do. So I'm going to dispense with the hot water now, because I've done that job. So I'll turn that off. I'll take the heat out of the boiler. I'll turn my thermostatic expansion valve back to 20. So now it's just running on cold water. And there's still heat coming out of that, residual heat. I'll just put the camera down. Okay, so I shut down the main fan. It's a bit cooler. There's a bit less noise now. It's a little bit more adequate to live with. And this water here gets colder now because there's no hot water going into the system. I was taking water out of the hot water system at probably 70 degrees C, putting it through my fan coil unit and probably dropping it down to like 30 degrees C into the, 50 degrees C, but mixing with the cold water through the thermostatic expansion valve to deliver 30 degrees C water to the heat pump. And I thought, you know, the hotter the water going into the heat pump, the more heat pump it would give out, but actually that didn't prove to be the case. All it meant was the heat pump would trip out on high temperature because it wasn't getting enough cooling. So there's a limit to what it can handle in terms of water temperature, right? I think it can probably take 38 degrees C, but then I'd be throwing hot water down the sink. So if I take this little thermocouple now from here and I put it down the sink, you'll be able to see the temperature of the water coming out of the heat pump. So the heat pump's actually cooling down the water. It's dropping down to 17. And I think we said the water temperature at the tap was 16, so I'll just prove that by running the tap, which has got just cold water coming out of it. It's got nothing to do with this. I'll just run this on the tap here. So it's just saying 12, it's 13. This is the water temperature coming out of the water main. You can see how much water I'm wasting. It's not a huge amount. It's not too bad. It's 14. Still coming up, 14.2. .3. I mean, nothing happens particularly fast with thermodynamics. Yeah, it's 14.3, so we could probably say the water temperature coming out of the water main is 14 degrees. And then I'll put it back down the drain here, turn off the tap, and now that is just the water temperature coming off of the heat pump. And the heat pump itself is just this one fan now, and that's blowing 36 degrees C out. The room temperature is 14 degrees now. And this room temperature is 13.9, but this is saying 14 degrees C. Another feature I did with this is I got this big carbon filter and I took the carbon out of it. This is an industrial filter that I found lying around at work, and I shut it and I filled that with wood pellets. So that's actually a mesh, and I filled it with wood pellets, you know, rather than buying that expensive soundproof foam, and it makes a little bit of difference. It makes a tiny bit of difference. I've tried all sorts of experiments over the years with heating systems, and I will post some of my earlier ones. I was using a water blaster outside. I used the boiler off a water blaster powered by propane. That was the first thing I did, and then going through a car radiator, which was fine. But the little boiler the little water blaster boiler was very inefficient, and so I put my hand over the exhaust and I couldn't hold my hand there, which meant the exhaust temperature from the boiler, although it was heating the water, it was throwing a lot of heat to atmosphere. So I was heating up the outside of the garage, I was heating up the atmosphere, and it was costing me propane to do that. I've got a video which I'm going to post retrospectively about that one. I'll actually post it after this one, because this is, you know, by no means, you know, a finished project. This is an ongoing project. Heating my garage is an ongoing project. In fact, to be honest with you, I've spent more time on my garage heating systems than anything else I've done in my garage. To be honest, I only really come down here to fuck around with the heating system. But so that was the first one. Then the second one, I upgraded to one of those camping propane heaters. So that's the kind of things you take camping with you, and it runs off a propane bottle, and it was better at heating the water, but it was still very inefficient because it's not designed for continuous use. Like a central heating boiler is designed to work continuously, so it's very efficient. It only just throws out enough heat to get rid of the moisture and not damage the temperature is not so low that it, you know, makes the products of combustion corrode the heat exchanger. So that's the same with the LPG heater I've got in the house. It's a reasonably efficient one, but you know, at high load, you can't put your hand above the exhaust at high load and get, you know, hold your hand there, which means it's over 70 degrees C. But as you saw earlier, I can actually do it at low load. When I'm just doing that first warm up the garage stage, or I just kick things off by running my first big heat. Of course, if it's a really cold night, it's like 1 degree or 0 degrees outside, then I'd probably leave the boiler running and give myself as much heat as possible. But to be honest, it's a bit too noisy to leave it on all the time. So here we look at the thermocouple now. It's 11 degrees C going down the drain. So we've taken, we said it was 14.3 when we took the thermocouple off the tap. That's the water temperature coming in, and it's cooling it down to 11.2. So it's taking 3 degrees C of simple heat out of that water. And for that 3 degrees of simple heat, I'm getting roughly 15 kilowatts of heat out of this heat pump, which is hard to believe. Now it's 38 degrees C. That comes up as the room temperature comes up. So still at 14. The highest I've seen with my heater on for a few hours is 47 degrees going into the room. And I have had occasions where it actually started to get too hot in here and I had to turn the thing off. But for the most part, it's adequate. So the next stage will be to put 2 heat pumps in series with the little fan coil unit serving both. So the water will come in from the boiler, it'll go through the fan coil unit, it'll come out of the fan coil unit, it'll go into the first heat exchange, the first heat pump. The wastewater from the first heat pump will go into the second heat pump, and it'll go down the drain. And that should give me, believe it or not, about 30 kilowatts of heat. So that should give me like way enough heat to keep this room toasty. It hasn't got any insulation on the garage door. This is a cedar door. I mean, that is like ½ an inch thick. So that's not very efficient. It's got a great big gap here all the way around. So, you know, there's air gaps around this garage door. So, you know, you're constantly battling that. I know for a fact there's no insulation in the roof, and there's no insulation under the floor. This house has insulation in the roof and the walls and double glazing everywhere else in the house, but in the garage it's just got no insulation under the roof, no insulation in the floor, and, well, to be honest, it looks like it's single glazed. So, you know, it's not meant as an environment to relax or, you know, watch TV in, but it is meant as a garage, and, you know, for someone like me, it's a really important space. So probably important to you as well, and that might be why you're watching this. But it's something you can try. These things are not expensive if you keep your eye open. If you go on eBay or Gumtree or whatever, Trade Me, whatever, you know, of those kind of eBay type places you use, and look for marine heat pump, marine air conditioner, those sort of things, and I guarantee you'll find one second hand, cheap as, you know. The other thing about them is they're actually really well made. I mean, they're made to a marine standard. So like the coil is, the cooling coil within that is copper. You know, it's not steel. It won't rust out. The problem I had with my original heater was the water blaster boiler was made of steel, a coil of wound copper, wound steel, and it rusted out. So it started to get a leak out of it, and so that was the end of it. I couldn't fix it. That was the end of that project, and I had to chuck that in the bin. Probably one thing I would like to try is getting another water blaster that's designed to run on diesel, and then you know, running it on biodiesel. So just having a, you know, the boiler of a water blaster parked outside, heating your garage off biodiesel would be really cool. And I think if you had like a really man-sized shed, that's what you'd be looking at, some kind of biodiesel, or, you know, some sort of free fuel component, something you can do for free. I mean, I'm actually paying for electricity and I'm paying for gas to heat my garage. I don't really need to. I'm only doing it tonight for the sake of this video, but it's not too bad. It's working well. It gives me something to think about. So I'm happy with that. It's up to 39 degrees C now. It's just ticked over the 40, so you get the idea. 15 or 20 minutes. Takes, don't know why that is. Just the gas is flowing around the side. Maybe it's an old one, maybe it's fucked. Maybe it doesn't have enough gas in it. I don't know, but you know, it works fine. When it dies, I'll put one of the other ones in, but I don't expect it to die anytime. So I'll switch it off now. It's probably a lot quieter. You can still hear the water going down the sink. I don't immediately turn the water off. I'm just letting the water suck some of the heat out, suck the cold out of the refrigerant, which is still in the heat pump. And that's what your heat pump does when you shut it down, actually. If you've got a heat pump or a modern one, you push stop in the room and the evaporator in the room shuts down, but the condensing unit, it winds down slowly. It doesn't shut down immediately because it doesn't want to freeze itself. So the last thing I do is I turn off the water, and that's ready to go for the next time I need to heat my garage up. So just as a final note, we'll see what temperature we got to. 14.7, so, you know, I don't know, 24 minutes this video has been going. We started in the garage, was at 12 degrees C, and now it's at 14.7 degrees C. So it's 3 meters starred. I think I've worked out it's like 330 cubic meter garage. It's probably a little bit colder over here by the door, but I'm in my shirt sleeves. I'm not particularly cold in here. I've got my woolly hat on, but you know, this is fine to work in for a few hours and not get a chill, and that's the whole point of it. Okie doke, thanks for watching.